All those epic confrontations and more you are probably not going to see over the course of this playthrough. I mean, unless I get ridiculously lucky. That I'll explain in a little bit more depth a little bit later on. But anyways, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelists of the Roses. You might wonder why I'm even doing this, because I kind of just, bailed on the game along with the old channel I had with over 200 subs, but I decided that after the absolute train wreck that was the Luigi's Mansion 64 LP, which is in fact my first ever dropped one, I wanted to try to go for a bit more of a safe zone in regards to a game, something that I knew pretty well and could try to at least make interesting. And so what we have here is a game that I got with my first PlayStation 2, I think Christmas 2003. I sucked at it at the start, but I eventually did work all the kinks out and whatnot, and I ended up getting to be pretty decent at the game. So here we have a bit of a just random intro to explain the gimmick with this game. Back on the PlayStation 1 there was another Yu-Gi-Oh game called Forbidden Memories, and when that was set in ancient Egypt, where you would it's basically just Yu-Gi-Oh, but I think it did run under some slightly different rules. But for the most part, it was just Yu-Gi-Oh back in Egyptian times. This is intended to be a sequel, and instead of being set in Egyptian times, it is set in the late 15th century England. Well, England and France, but around about that area. So, the whole centerpiece around this game is the Wars of the Roses between Lancaster, the Red Rose, and York, which is the White Rose, both of which have their own fair share of Yu-Gi-Oh characters. The Red Rose is basically just the good guys with the Yu-Gis and the Joeys and that sort of thing, whereas the White Rose has Kaiba and pretty much just a bunch of the schmucks that you come across in Duelist Kingdom, really. But that we'll go into a little bit more depth on at some point in the future. In the meantime, we have a KKK Smurf. I don't know. He's basically just like some random druid that is summoned from Scotland in order to summon somebody from the future using the power of rose cards, and it turns out your character is that person meant to fulfill the prophecy and just bring balance to the force and whatnot. So, I'm gonna go ahead and put in a name. Unsurprising given this is me, but you'll actually find that the name entry is actually quite a bit more consequential than you might think. This I'll explain in just a bit of a moment here, because we've still got a bit more exposition to put in. A bit more Basil exposition. If this guy's name wasn't quite clearly displayed there, I would probably have just called him Basil. I'm probably just going to call him Basil anyway, because that's all he's really known for in this game, is to just provide a whole bunch of exposition. So it only makes sense for him to be called Basil. So, he goes on a bit of a tangent about rose cards. There are red rose cards, there are white rose cards. And your position is to basically join the Red Rose and restore order to the throne of England by seeing to it that their leader is crowned king, basically. So, not going to play at Practice Duel because that's going to take way too freaking long, and I would rather this segment be nice, short and sweet. It's basically just going to be an introduction. I'm not actually going to be playing any duels here. But here I just sort of get to go through the very long-winded introduction, which I've done a bunch of times in the past on recording, but hopefully this time around I'll actually get something that I can actually use, because this is my second time in this session doing this segment, because the last one, the intro wasn't really that good, and the audio, for some stupid reason, was biased towards the right speaker, so I'm not too sure what the go is with that. But anyways, we have 3 different decks to choose from. The card that you see here is the leader of that deck. The deck leader, I will explain, well, now obviously, is basically just the avatar that represents you on the game board, and that I'll go into further detail in next segment. But on the right, you can see the types and attributes that you're most likely to see in the deck. This one's obviously very much Pyro, Rock-based, a few Warriors, Beast Warriors, and that sort of stuff in there. And like Parshath, this one has a bunch of Fairies, Warriors, that sort of thing. And then here we just have Water deck, before Mermails became Water deck. This is circa 2003. You don't even get Buster Blader in this game. That's how old this thing is. So, most of the monsters, like this level 5 monster, there are plenty level 5 monsters in the current game that are just better than this. But this is about as good as it gets for level 5 monsters. So, on the left you'll see the average summon level, which I will go into a little bit more detail again once we actually get into a game in the next segment. But for now I'm going to go with Molten Behemoth. I've seen this deck, I had a good look at this deck in the previous attempt at the segment, and it's actually a pretty damn solid one. There's no traps in it though, which is a bit but I think I'm actually in quite a good position to take that deck and go with what I had originally planned. And Seto is going to sort of explain that now that he's come in here, looking even more ridiculous than he ever did in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. In case people were wondering about his obsession with Blue Eyes White Dragon, even though that getup is quite clearly not white in the absolute slightest. But whatever. I'm not even sure what color you'd even call that. It's looks like a very, very faded, like light blue or baby blue or something like that. I've got no idea what the hell that is. It might be a slight bit grayish, maybe blue-gray, like Borat, like this is gray. It's definitely not black, and it's definitely not a cat in a hat. So, paying absolutely no attention to the dialogue because I've seen it Lord knows how many frickin' times. I already know the gist of this story here, so it's not like it actually matters to me. So, 16 rose cards. There are 8 to each side, as he's about to explain here. Yeah, 8 red rose, 8 white rose cards. The idea is that you pick one of the two sides, and then you gather all the rose cards of the other side that you didn't join. And then once you've done one side, you get sent back here to take on the other side. And then once you've done that, it basically just becomes open world, and you can fight whoever you want and try to get your collection as complete as possible. Getting an actual complete collection of all 859 cards, I think it is. Technically 858, but whatever. That is actually impossible because there are some cards that are quite literally unobtainable outside of using an action replay code. Most of these are monsters that are summoned through rituals, like Bloodluster Soldier, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. And then there's just some other random shit, like there's apparently Summoned Lord Exodia, which is just Exodia complete. That just gets added to your library once you've summoned Exodia at least once, which is weird, but you just can never get the actual card itself because it, for some reason, just it counts, but at the same time it doesn't. I don't know what the go is with that. But then there's other stuff like Ryoku, which is like a really broken card, but you can't get it in this game for whatever reason. I don't even think you can get Mirror Force in this game, which is quite depressing. But anyhow, we're gonna go ahead and side with the Yorkists first up. I'm gonna be a bad guy first. The reason for that is because I'm not really sure which one is more boring than the other. But the way it works is if you side with the Red Rose, you get 2 duels to choose from at the start, and then basically just move on from there and sort of do them in whatever order you want. The Red Rose is literally about as linear as it gets. You just go from one duelist to the next, to the next, to the next, and then eventually you get to Yugi, you beat him, and then you go back to Stonehenge for a final battle. That's basically how that works. This one, you're just, like, on the other side, you've just got a bunch of different choices. Eventually you have to knock them all over eventually to complete that side of the story, but it's probably going to be a bit more on the convoluted side, so I figured I'd try to keep things as simple as I can and go with the linear side first. There's also a couple of opponents on the white side that are actually somewhat difficult to deal with. So if I go through this side first, or any of the cards that I can get from any of these characters will benefit me greatly. I'm pretty sure you can just fight them as many times as you want as long as I'm on this side. So if I get up to Joey, I might try to like knock him over a couple times to get a few of his good cards, because unsurprisingly he'll have stuff like Red Eyes Black Dragon, Time Wizard, Metal Morph, that sort of thing. So anyhow, let's go ahead and have a look at the deck. So you'll notice first up we've got a couple of dragons. These are actually quite nice, because as a quick sort of explanation before I show it off in an actual game in the next segment, hopefully, you can fuse monsters just by, like, there's no polymerization in this deck, in this game even. So there's just an option where you can sort of use multiple cards from your hand, and if they are compatible with each other, they'll fuse. There's a whole bunch of different ways that cards can be compatible with each other. Like if you have a power-up card, you can fit it onto a monster that would benefit from such a power-up card. And then obviously you can have two monsters, like for example, let's say we've got our Winged Dragon, Guardian of the Fortress, and we can combine it with, let's say, this Flame Ghost. It's a zombie, and it's a zombie plus a dragon. It makes a dragon zombie. And then another example would be something along the lines of, let's say my Shovel Crusher, just a machine type, fuse it with one of my dragons, I get Metal Dragon. One of my favorites is to combine a Thunder type monster with a reasonably high leveled Dragon type monster to get a twin-headed Thunder Dragon. That gets to be a pretty damn powerful monster if you can get that on board. So I quite like having that. One fusion that you'll see me use quite a lot is the combination of a Pyro type plus a Warrior type, which will give you Flame Swordsman. I imagine I'll be getting a good amount of use out of that. I'm not too sure if Pyro can fuse with anything else. It might be able to fuse with Rock, maybe. I'm not too sure about that. I don't have every fusion in memory. Wasteland, normally it's a field spell, but in this case what it does is it transforms a chunk of the board into wasteland terrain. That'll go into a little bit more detail in the next segment. Hinotama, just life point damage, and then a few power-up cards. So, again, like I said, no traps, but I'm fine with that for the most part. If I can get another copy of this, and then it'd be nice to add into the deck, because Pyro Monsters plus 500. It's unfortunate that I only get the one copy to use as the deck leader, because I can't exactly take it out and put it into the regular deck, because I don't have anything that counts as a deck leader. The reason for that is because there is a rank. This is the lowest rank that you can have for a deck leader, and everything else, NCO stands for not a commanding officer. That basically just means that you need to give it some good use in duels, and then eventually it'll get promoted to the second lieutenant position, and then therefore can be a leader. There are leader abilities, but I'm not going to really focus on that too much, because leader abilities are only obtained when you rank up your deck leader, and getting your deck leader rank up in this game is the stupidest damn thing. It's like a RuneScape grind. I don't think I've ever gotten any deck leader ever in a game beyond, I think, maybe like Lieutenant Colonel or something like that, and that's not even maybe halfway up the ladder of all the ranks. Like the highest one I know is called Secretary of Defense, and that's just, I've not gotten anywhere near that, because it just takes so long to promote your deck leaders. It's just ridiculous. You'd probably get like half of your freaking 99s in a RuneScape account, old school RuneScape account, but by the time you get something up to Secretary of Defense. So anyhow, this deck looks pretty good. Up the top, you may have just missed it there, is deck cost. Seto explained it in the exposition thing, but in order to capture an opponent's Rose card, your deck cost has to be lower than theirs. In this case, mine is nearly 100 lower than hers, so I will quite easily be able to claim her Rose card. As a matter of fact, you can't even duel them unless your deck cost is below the opponent's, so that's not that big of a deal. It's not like it's going to put you at much of a disadvantage, because the lower their deck cost is, the weaker their deck's probably most likely to be, because for the most part you're just going to be dealing with stuff that, like, you're going to be dealing with your opponents on terrain that's going to benefit them anyway, so they're going to have that sort of advantage. So and that's another good thing about having Wasteland in my deck, is I can manipulate the terrain so that it benefits me more than it benefits them. So I think that's about it. We're approaching about 18 minutes. I don't know how much of it's going to get shaved off the beginning, but I'd say this is a pretty good first segment. Next time we're going to be taking on, well, there's no accent on top of the E, so let's just say we're going to sip a cup of tea next time and just turn that into a stupid running joke, even though I don't think I'll ever frickin' be fighting Teo ever again in this game, because she doesn't actually give you that much. If I was running the Air Knight Parshath deck, then that would be a bit more beneficial to my interests, but yeah. That's, yeah, it bumped the frickin' microphone up. Alright, I think I'm about done now.